All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Monty Latchley. I'm the president of ODTUG. And for the next hour, I'll try to keep the conversation flowing as we travel up, down, and across the Oracle technology stack. If you're unfamiliar with ODTUG, we're one of the largest Oracle-centric user groups. We provide technical information you need to succeed. And most importantly, we provide you access to some of the brightest Oracle minds out there, like these folks assembled here for you today. Let me begin by introducing our panel. On the end is Tim Gorman. I've only known Tim about a year now, and I became instantly, developed a deep respect for his technical abilities and his organizational skills and his leadership skills. Sitting next to him is his partner, Kellen Covan, and she is, if you're playing with Enterprise Manager, or if you have some traditional DBA questions, Kellen can certainly answer them. Next up is Martin D'Souza. Actually, that's kind of an inside joke. This is Cameron Lackford. A long time ago, someone misunderstood or mistook them, and they've been unable to live that down. So we don't pass up an opportunity to make fun of them like that.
I'd just like to mention that in case we get confused up here on the panel, these signs are pretty old signs, so I'm actually Cameron.
So if you are working with BIEPM, Hyperion, S-Base, ODI, Cam's your guy. He also has a newsletter that I would encourage you all to subscribe to if you're not already doing so. Next up is our Apex star, Martin D'Souza. Martin quite simply knows everything there is to know about Oracle Application Express. So if you think you can stump him, I say go ahead and try. He's the best out there, and we're lucky to have him on the ODTUG board. And finally, we have Mr. Godeka himself, the Alabama Hammer, Mr. Tim Toe. So there's our panel. As I mentioned, these are all Oracle ACE directors. Tim, would you give us a few sentences about the ACE Director program?
Yeah, it's an honorary program, different from the certifications. The members are nominated, so you have the ACE program itself, and then the ACE directors are recognized as providing or having put in more investment into the community. Not only just the Oracle community, but also nonprofit and charitable and everything like that. So it's basically a recognition kind of award.
Okay, so for the next hour, we're going to take questions from the audience. We'll take some questions from Twitter. And I'll start out with one that I'm sure that the panel is going to have a lot to offer up. The Department of Labor foresees 1.4 million new jobs in the computer industry by 2020. What requirements will need to change in the standard educational curriculum to meet that demand? And I'm going to start with Kellen.
You can tell who wrote that one. This is something that's close and dear to my heart. I have 3 teenage children at this point, and I find that it's very challenging when I am going down there and looking at their actual curriculum. And they're very proud of their computer lab with their 32 XP machines, and they're teaching them how to format a USB drive. And the requirement can be done either in junior high or high school. And the college, or the actual computer course, entails learning Microsoft Office. And I think all of us in this room can say that is not computer technology, that is Office technology. It is important to know, but computer technology at this point is very important to know. With the numbers that you're seeing there, we are not going to have the workforce needed to fulfill those jobs. I feel that we need to get into the schools, elementary age, and start at 6, 7 years old. Start teaching computer programming before any of this stuff becomes geek, nerd. I'm not going to do this. Oh, Mom, I don't want to be cool. You know, I want to be cool. You know, I don't want to be identified as a geek or a nerd. Before we get into the stuff of saying, you know, all the popular girls do not do computer programming, which is another big thing for me as a person who belongs very powerfully in WIT. And get the kids ready so that when they're graduating from high school, they can get into entry-level positions as computer programmers. And that's kind of my take on it. That's where I feel we need to be, because if we're not doing it, other countries are.
Martin, you want to follow up with that?
Yeah, I could probably go on for hours, and if you buy me a beer or two, I'll do that. But, like, I'm not gonna say anything against Kelly's answers, they're absolutely correct, but one other thing that I'm finding, and I see it with my nieces and nephews, and especially kids coming out of high school, is a lot of people say, well, my kid's smart, they know how to use an iPad. And the iPad's just a tool. I know how to use a hammer. I know how to use a screwdriver. But you can't do anything with a hammer or a screwdriver unless you know how to build a house. And building a house requires thinking. And I think that's what they're missing sometimes, at least the kids that I see coming out of university right now, going into the workplace, is how to logically think about a problem. I was teaching at a college in Alberta, and I was teaching an Apex course. And some of the students were getting really stumped on some of the problems. So I said, okay, let's forget about the technology here and let's whiteboard what the actual problem was. And about 50% of them couldn't even whiteboard what the problem was. And if you can't understand what the problem is, then there's no way you're going to use whatever tool you have to come up with a solution. So I think that's one of them. And I can continue going on, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Anyone else?
I have a question actually on Martin's. Do you think that's because they're teaching tests versus teaching logical thinking in school?
Yeah, that's part of it. I think students need to think and along the lines of teachers. I'm not sure how it all is, just in case people didn't know, I'm from Canada, so I'm not sure how everything's run here, but the teacher system in Canada is very centric around, if you leave your school board, you're going to go back into the bottom of the line. So you can be teaching 10, 20 years in a school board and you move to a different city, you're going to be at the bottom doing subs. And because of that, you're not getting cross-pollination, and the unions are very strong and you can't get rid of bad teachers. And the second that you have that, there's no incentive for teachers to actually to really push themselves and push the students, because it's the same thing year in, year out. So I mean, I'm digressing a bit from your question, but I think part of it is the teachers we need more cross-pollination. We also need professionals like yourself going into the schools and talking to the kids about what is computer engineering. Everyone thinks you're talking about nerds and geeks, and everyone thinks a computer engineer is just hunched over their desk all the time, and it's not like that. There's a lot of interesting things people do out there, and I think as computer people and everyone in this room, we have to go out and tell the kids that.
I know whenever I was in college, we were still punching cards. I'm not going to, but it was at a time where you weren't doing that out in the private sector. I mean, we were still punching cards. At the time, there was probably, there was several years difference between what was going on in the real world and what I was doing in college. How much can we realistically expect that to shrink? I mean, we're never going to be doing things in college that they're doing out on the street, but I mean, how much progress do you think can be made in that area?
I'd like to comment on this. I think it's a fallacy to think that university education is going to train you in what people are using now. I graduated in '90. The things that were hot in 1990 are dead. Delphi, the early stages of VB, COBOL, that was what I was taught on, Fortran. I don't think anybody does that now.
They still do.
They're still
They
in
still
production.
COBOL? You can make a lot of money in COBOL if you want.
My first coding language was Fortran 77. I haven't seen Fortran 77 since 10th grade.
I've got a job right for you.
But my point being, though, that specific technologies are not what I would focus on. I would think it's more the ability to logically think. Two of the best developers that I know are philosophy majors, or were philosophy majors in college. And if you think about what does a philosophy major learn, he learns logic. That's one of the big things. They're really good coders. The rest of it they picked up on the job and in the course of work. But that ability to examine a problem, analyze the components of it, figure out possible solutions, present those solutions, and get people to buy in on yes, we're going to do X, or yes, we're going to do Y, and then finally deliver it. The finally delivered part's the part where you actually write the code. Everything else is the bit where you think about what the problem is and communicate what that issue is. So maybe everybody should be philosophy majors.
What about like non-technical stuff? I've noticed that some of the best programmers are actually musicians? Because there's,
It's the same brain activity, because I, you know, it's the same.
There's a very strong correlation between music and math, right? That's been noticed by many people. So yeah, I would.
music sometimes is more fun than math. If programming isn't cool, if math isn't cool, teaching music compositions is the next best thing as far as
I'm an accountant, I'm way cool. Yeah, I code. So, I did want to say, Colin, that my daughter's a teacher. She teaches first grade up in a small community in northeast Michigan, and actually did a code camp this year. So there's actually an organized code camp for that. She asked me to come up, unfortunately I was on the road. That was one thing I wanted to mention. Second thing is, addressing the philosophy student, it is the thinking process that really is important. You know, how many people here actually write code? How many people actually went to school to learn how to write code? How many people taught themselves more about what they do? Yeah, I learned to write code, by the way, by writing macros in Lotus 123. That's literally how I learned how to write code, and how I write Java code. Probably pretty good Java code, I think. But it's that whole critical thinking process. My second best developer I have in my company right now is a philosophy major. So it's actually my son. He's 27 years old, and he just wrote a multi-threaded authentication service that talks about LDAP and MSAD. So, and he's also playing around with iPad stuff, but writing really cool code stuff for it. So, anyway.
I still think there's this challenge that, and especially I'm going to go back to this, is that for girls, that it needs to be introduced very young, before we get preteen, before we get to those teenage years. They don't even realize it's an opportunity. I have way too many of my 16-year-old daughter's friends that are being told, girls aren't good at math, you'll do better in nursing, don't go into computers. I'm seeing way too many women that are getting into the career 30s, 40s, and unfortunately, that's holding them back, it's hurting them. We need to introduce it younger. And if we're going to be fulfilling all these jobs, we need to be getting kids in there younger so that they know it's an opportunity. That's what's missing, is that they don't realize it's there. We're finding it, but a lot of people just, they don't even realize it. My sister is just going tech, and she just turned 40.
My daughter's in 8th grade, and she's taking business and tech. She's the only girl in the class. And I was really surprised to hear that. I mean, I know Kellen's been really vocal and really passionate about the whole WIT program, but I never would have suspected that she would have been the only girl in that class. So, but she's doing really well.
How can it still be that way? It was like that.
No, it's going back.
Cool.
I do surveys at the conferences when I present, and I've not presented in any conference the past 5 years where there was more than 10% women in the room.
But
I'm sure you have
2000
something similar.
Yeah.
Like you have 100
2000
people,
was
you have 8
higher.
women.
We're dipping
really?
back. That's what everyone's finding, and there's numbers that back this up. Back in the 90s, the percentages were up, and if anybody talks to John King, he'll tell you the same thing. He had about 25% in his classes that were women, and now it's down closer to 10. When I started, I was in a group of 4 women DBAs. I have not worked in a group with one single female DBA now for like 7 years. It's really bad. It's like, where'd they all go? And a lot of them went to soft tech. They were able to proceed farther in their career there. And it's trying to figure out how those stereotypes versus discrimination are holding them back. But another thing is getting them in so that they're so passionate about it when they're younger that they don't want to give it up. So that's where I'm trying to go to.
Next question, are we going to graduate data scientists? Or is that something that that has to be learned, developed on the job?
As fast as big data is moving.
Sure. I'd say right now, obviously, it's a on-the-job kind of training thing. I guess I should ask, how many folks are familiar with the term data scientist? Yeah, it's getting a lot of press, but part of my choice, I mean, ODTUG is a big organization, and with a myriad of different skills that we all bring to the table, as exemplified here and in the room. My own personal backstory is just that I started off life as a C developer and realized after a company I worked for went out of business, and the only thing that we couldn't sell furniture, we couldn't sell systems, we could sell data. We did that over and over and over again as we went out of business. That data is where it's all at. So I think the term data scientist is kind of a recognition that data doesn't just accumulate, that you actually have to organize it and such. And maybe it's just an enhancement on the term database administrator, but I think it's more than that. I think it's kind of almost a governance kind of term. So I don't know if there'll ever be a major for that, but it's certainly an on-the-job kind of skill.
In the master, my husband's PhD data scientist. He works with like Twitter, crazy amounts of Twitter data and whatever else, find trends and all this stuff. And from the master's level now, he's saying that there are starting to be more like, and he gets very annoyed at the term data scientist. It's like, I've been doing this for 20 years and now I'm a data scientist. He's like, he kind of laughs when he says, you think you know data, you don't know from data with your Oracle databases. But I think more and more the universities are trying to bring it in, at least at the master's level and up. I don't know if it's going to get to high school or whatever else, but
right now the
it's
closest
starting
thing,
to seep in.
Yeah, the closest thing I'm aware of is a master's in business intelligence. That's about
Right,
it.
I think they call it like cognitive. It's like partially it's falling in between different things. Like he's in cognitive science and natural language processing. So I think it's.
Anyone else on the panel before we move on? All right, I've got a question for Cameron, the real Cameron. What business trends are driving your work in the form of projects, tools, and technology decisions? I mean, you have your own consultancy, right?
Yep. So I really, this is really a question I'd be more interested to hear what the audience has to say. So I've been in the space as a consultant, I guess, for almost 20 years. I've seen the applications that I work on change a lot, and I would hope they'd be a little different over 20 years. Oddly enough, right now I'm on a pure S-based project. It's like it's 1998 all over again. It's kind of odd to be back in a very limited set of tools. So I'd kind of like to get a feel for people out there, from people out there in the audience. What's changed if you are in the EPM world? What has changed in, say, the last 5 years? Is it the size of projects, or the size of the data that you touch, or the number of people that use the system? I mean, Oracle's gone great guns with expanding, driving S-Base in particular into the heart of a lot of different tools. Anything out there? Or you guys are all just a bunch of BSO S-Base guys from 1998? Just like
Cameron's pulled a fast one on you. He's asking you the questions now. So
exactly right.
Anyone?
I've been building a lot of specialty cubes,
Okay.
specialty built purpose cubes for companies that are mature with Hyperion and Oracle. So they want analytical cubes just to do one or two functions that just load up. They just run a report every month.
Are these ones that you build through tools like Studio? Are you using the newer tools to spin these faster, or are you doing traditional database builds?
Traditional ASO cubes.
So through EAS and Maxwell and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyone else? I'll talk a little bit more about the things that I've seen change, but go ahead.
A lot of the work I'm seeing is the technology is less important than revisiting the business process of generating a forecast, generating a budget, and what's appropriate level of detail and all those good questions. But from a technology perspective, it seems like the web front end, this makes it easier, or this requires less knowledge to get at the data you want, seems to be the driving force from a tool and from a, overall work that's coming in perspective.
So you're seeing wider usage of the tool, or you're seeing less skill required to implement the tool?
Both. And I guess less on the implementation side, more on the consumption side. So less skill required by the end user to get at what they're looking for. Think back to 10 years ago when it was you had to know the add-in and retrieve and setting up, and now it's come a little, it's come a long ways, but drag and drop, right? And now you have drag and drop on the web with when you bring forms into analyze mode.
Gotcha. So Tim, I'd like to kind of I'll end this question with a question to Tim. So Tim and I are both in the EPM space. Tim has his own product, ODTUG, in case you haven't heard of that yet. Tim, what would you say you're seeing change in the market, both for your product and for the other EPM BI suite products?
I agree with John. I think the whole push to the end user, make it easier so end users can use tools. I think it maybe part of it has to do with social and the expectations these days for how things are so easy to use on your phone. You know, I think that's a big driver that we see. And we even see that with what we do with spreadsheets. I mean, we make it easy for end users to access spreadsheets. The other thing we see is integrity of data as well. So making it so that, you know, the delivery of the information to the user, even if it's a detailed level of information, is built consistently so that the data is always accurate. That's been a huge thing. So especially in the spreadsheet world. I mean, we live in the spreadsheet world, and there's some big spreadsheet errors. You've probably heard of it in the news. You probably didn't know there were errors, but like the big JP Morgan Chase loss, the $6 billion was actually a spreadsheet error. So causing people to take a look at what they're doing with spreadsheets.
Anyone else? All right.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, yes, I found that over the course of the past 6 years, 7 years I've been using Essbase, that I've been making use of a lot of attribute dimensions because our data is pretty dirty, and so I just create those base dimensions using our native data and then remap everything to what the business actually wants to see from an attribute perspective. And I see once I was able to develop and employ that functionality, then it just began to spin. I might have 20, 25 different attribute dimensions to cleanse the data that so that the business can report on in a way that the underlying systems can't support.
There's different ways to slice the data.
Yeah, then
for the end users.
For the end users, that's not native to the or that isn't predefined in the underlying relational database.
Right. Yeah, we're seeing that too. I mean, I've got a customer right now that has 35 or 40 attribute dimensions.
Yes.
So the attribute dimensions for the non-Essbase people, they are just essentially they're mappings that give different attributes on how the data rolls up, essentially, so that you can see. You know, I have some products that are listed by product in the database, but I want to see the other products that are the color red and the ones that are color green, and separate those out. So that's the type of thing that you see.
You know, effectively, all my cubes are the base dimensions are not reported on. It's only the attribute dimensions that are actually utilized by the end user.
Yeah, and I think we'll actually see more of that going into the future. So with the plans of what Oracle's doing with Essbase, I think we'll actually see a lot more of that. Do you agree, Cameron?
Yes. Well, I'm on a. I guess we can't talk too much about it, but yes, you will soon use attribute dimensions more. Think about where you would not want to use them today, and then think about a reason why that would no longer exist, and yeah, that's where the tools go. That's all I could say.
All right, thank you. With the release of 12C, I think this is something that you guys would all have an opinion on. With the release of 12C, we'll start on the other end with Tim and work our way down. Tim, what's your favorite 12C feature?
Automatic data optimization. For the past, about 14 years, I've been implementing tiered storage for large data warehouses by hand, first in Perl, then in PL SQL. And when I saw actually participated in my first 12C presentation back in August, I saw all that work, 14 years of code, just gone. You know, everything was. I actually do have several thousand lines of PL SQL code to implement storage tiering, and that is right-sizing data for the physical storage on which it's based. And with the 12C automatic data optimization, you can identify data that's hot, data that's not. Sorry for the alliteration, but that's the sales talk. And then move the data over time as it's new and hot. You have it on, say, flash drive, fast storage. Move it to SATA drives, cooler storage, less expensive storage. Again, several thousand lines of PL SQL code that I've written over the years is just gone, disappeared in favor of a few lines of an altered table statement. So that's my favorite.
So Tim, you'd say that Oracle database is now as smart as you are?
You don't have to answer that.
Yeah. Finally, after all these years?
Smarter.
All right. How about you, Kellen?
There's a lot of features, but I'd say the pluggable database, and the reason is that the ability to actually back them up, clone them in very easy ways, and going towards database as a service with the M12C. The idea that you can actually just put out actual profiles and templates out there and have it out there, not as a database administrator. Be creating databases all day, let somebody else do that. Because I do have some clients with thousands of targets and are asking for databases, on a daily basis. I don't want to be the one creating those. I would rather create it as a service and let other people ask for it.
Cameron, do you have a favorite 12C feature, or are you guys far enough away from the?
At least personally, I'm far away.
Yeah.
What about you, Martin?
I'm right in there.
Yeah, you are.
So I'll do more of a developer perspective. I'm going to take Cam's spot and use his answer as well for some of them. So I've got a whole list here, but probably for developers, some of the quick things are the varchar 2 size. Before, if you developed a lot, varchar 2 was capped on 4,000, and that caused so many errors. So now you can easily expand it to 32,000 around. The other thing that's really fun is the with function, in that you're allowed a with clause and writing a function right in a query. And as a developer, there's a lot of times where you get one-off queries you need to write, one-off reports, where sometimes the release process is so complicated just to get a function in is really difficult. Now you can embed a function directly in the query that's performant. And the last one is, I actually read this article today, it's called row pattern matching, and the actual expression is called match recognition. And it's really, who here uses analytic functions? A few people. It allows you to go a lot deeper than analytic functions. There's an article from Tom Kite in the November-December Oracle magazine. I highly recommend you read it. But long story short, if you have stock data that goes up and down and up and down, if you want to know your peaks and your valleys, which some people want to do, let's say you're hedging against the stock market, you want to know the second it peaks and then the second it hits the bottom. You only know it hits the bottom when it starts going back up. So you see this common in stock traders, that they'll sell at the top and buy at the bottom. If you actually try and write that query in Oracle, it's very difficult on a pre-12C version. Come 12C now, it's a lot easier to write, and it's a lot more performant. And if you want a great example, go read that article from the November-December issue. It's great, it's got a good thing, and you can start applying that to a lot of different areas, and it's going to be relevant for a lot of different people.
How about you, Tim? Are you far enough away from the database, or?
To some degree, but I had just some comments as well. First is a question for Martin. So, we are a bit away from the database, being the S-base and EPM side. It's kind of under the covers for us. But one thing that does affect us a lot is when we do drill throughs from S-base data into relational data. And what happens is we use an in clause for that. And the in clause is capped at 1,000 members. 1,000 items in the in clause. Has that changed in 12C?
I have no idea.
Why? Why don't you know?
That's not an Apex question.
It's not Apex.
No.
Okay.
I know everything about Apex apparently,
All right.
just not
I
the
think you just got an answer from Tim.
Sorry,
So,
no.
is there, it didn't change?
Did not change.
Okay. Is it, SQL Server doesn't have one. Is there any Microsoft employees here spying? Go away. So,
Right, I know that,
just,
yeah.
okay. So the other thing I'll have to say about 12 is, in S-Base we're still on version 11, so we're not really to 12 yet for S-Base, but 12 does hold something dear to my heart. Everybody's mentioned, my company has a product called Dodeca. Dodeca actually means 12 in Greek. So take it what you will.
Spooky. I understand we have a question from the Twitter sphere.
Yes, I'll try to. It's from Jeff Smith, and he says, what can we do as vendors to better enable our customers with successful implementations and projects?
Pay people to buy the product.
So just for those of you who don't know Jeff Smith is, I believe he's one of his official title might be product manager, but he's heavily integrated and responsible for the SQL developer. Who here uses SQL developer? Okay, good. A lot of people. For those that don't, you should. They just released, him and Chris Rice just released version 4 over the holidays, so it's a very good product. I highly recommend it. Best of all, it's free, and it's got a lot of great features in there.
Let's not leave SQL Developer for a minute. I'm always fascinated by what tools you guys have in your toolbox. And so I choose to believe the difference between me and you guys is you guys are just far more efficient, you have greater tool knowledge, and that you get there, you get to the destination quicker than, let's say, the rest of us. Tim, what's some of the it can be open source tools, it can be for free tools, what's some of the things that you lean on, tools in your toolbox? Editors or what's
The things I lean on, I mean, I do Java code most of the time, so unfortunately I don't use the Oracle tool because it tends to get you to the latest version of Java, which means it probably won't work with S-Base. So I use IntelliJ. That's my tool that I lean on every day. So when I'm writing code, I do that. When I'm not writing code, I pull my hair out. I have to use sales, all that kind of crap that I hate.
Mark?
So I use a whole bunch of them. I'm actually, based on the client, I work on a Mac system or on Windows. So in Windows, I love Notepad++. I use SQL Developer across the board. I use shell scripting, you name it. One thing I'm looking into a lot more is Node.js. It's a really popular server system that you can quickly do builds and releases with as well. One thing that probably a lot of people might not want to hear is just documentation. Constantly reading the documentation. There's a lot of it. You can't always read everything, but sometimes it's good just to take a night and say, I'm going to read something. One night I read the Oracle, how Oracle does error handling, and it's a nice long documentation. It was a good, put me to sleep after a while, but I learned so much now that the next time there's these odd cases and end cases that you might hit with an error that you might never know until you actually read it. And of course the blogs. There's tons of content. There's no way to keep up to date with everything, and so the blogs have a lot of great information. And I got to plug as well, ODTUG has all their different blog sites. So if you go to odtug.com and I think you click on the communities link, each community page has their own blog site that aggregates them all together. So I definitely recommend checking them out. And I think everyone on this panel has their blog up there as well.
Cameron, what tools do you rely on?
So I use some non-Oracle tools. I do a lot of stuff with SQL Server, so SQL Server Management Studio, VMware. I'm a IT department of one since I have my own little company. I'm like the worst infrastructure person in the world, so my installs always take like 3 or 4 shots. VMware lets me make those mistakes again and again and again, but I can snapshot it along as I succeed. I do a lot with Twitter. Twitter was something I resisted for a long time because I just hated the name and I hated the fact that you tweeted. I just didn't like the sound of that. I have actually found that if you only follow technology people, you can find an amazing amount of information. It's actually almost too much. But I have found that to be a very quick way to jump to topics that I'm interested in. I try to follow kind of a series of blogs on a weekly basis as well, but that can take a lot of time. Twitter is kind of a quick way to get there. I'm also a big fan of Notepad++ as well, because you can, for those of you who use S-Base, don't use the horrific editors that Oracle provides. Notepad++ is much better. It's got syntax checkers, it's got syntax highlighters. That's all there and available pretty much for free. So
I use it probably 100 times a day, I think.
Can I ask you 2 questions? First is, for VMware, is there any reason why you're not using VirtualBox from Oracle?
I've been with VM Workstation for a long time. I mean, like for 7 years or something like that. I just keep on upgrading. It's only $75 every time I upgrade. So that's probably half the reason.
For those who don't know, Oracle bought Java, and Java owned VirtualBox, which is a free virtualization software. So that's why some people are starting to use it a lot more over VMware, because it's free. And the second question is, how are you using SQL Developer to connect to your SQL Server database?
I'm not. I use it at clients that are Oracle sites. My current client is an Oracle client, or an Oracle customer, so I use SQL Developer there. It's interesting. I do bounce between Management Studio and SQL Developer. SQL Developer is a little less tightly connected to the database, I think, than Microsoft's product, because it's Microsoft. It's all just one monolithic thing. Probably on a functionality basis, though, for the kind of limited SQL that I do, they're probably equal. No, I didn't know that you could connect. I didn't know you could connect to the
Yeah,
SQL Server.
you can actually, and Jeff Smith will probably have to correct me on the exact list, but you can connect with SQL Server to a lot of different databases. So it's a really good tool sometimes if you have that one-off situation where you need to connect to a SQL Server or to something else. I've used it for SQL Server, I know.
Goes to DB2 also.
DB2, and I'm pretty sure it's probably MySQL.
Sybase? I think
MySQL, yeah.
Yes, we're getting the whole list here. there's a lot of connections in there, so it's a really good tool sometimes just to try out. And again, it's free as well. I feel like I'm an Oracle product rep here, just constantly pushing it.
Not yet.
But they're great tools. That's why I'm recommending them.
I'll mention one thing else about SQL Developer that's really cool. Often when I go to customers, their boxes are the desktop's completely locked down. I can download a version of SQL Developer that doesn't install, if I've got the right terminology there, but it's just like a kind of a sitting in a temp file kind of thing, but it just works. And that saves me at least a week with an client IT department getting a connection to an Oracle database. They give me a username and a password, and I have that as a download, I'm good to go. That's great.
Mm-hmm. Kellen, I think it was yesterday or day before yesterday, one of your tweets, it may have been a retweet, but it was 30 open source tools that are indispensable. And there was so many on there that I hadn't heard. I think they were largely Linux based, but it was a very good tweet. What are some of the tools that you rely on?
Well, we'll start out just for Jeff saying I don't use SQL Developer. I know he's watching. But there's a reason I don't. I'm a remote DBA. I work from home. When I'm VPN'd into a customer site, I usually cannot connect to their databases through SQL Developer. So I am one of the few DBAs that do not use it, even though most do. I am the EM12C person. I am. I have 12 EM12C environments that I manage at this point for different clients as well as command line. That's what I do for a living. With EM12C, I am all about admin groups, enhanced rule sets, making sure that everything is automated. I am into IP reports. A lot of offices that I've worked in, they have had these huge Excel spreadsheets, and you'll love these ones, but it's collecting license data, all this other stuff that they collect in Excel, and they go on for miles, and I've turned them into IP reports and had EM12C collect that data automatically. And they can just click on it and it brings all that data back to them about their environment. Everything from the license information that they have, features that they're using, CPU, count, everything. Just automate all of it. So I use EM12C exclusively for a lot of things that most other people are using. A lot of shell scripts, Perl scripts, whatever else. I've taken it all and put it into jobs and IP reports, and I've automated it all. For me on my desktop, I've got a lot of presentations and everything else that I'm utilizing, so it's less technical stuff, but it's more about, making reports and doing pretty things with it. And the dashboards with the EM12C do allow me to do that. I can take a look at what they're utilizing across the board on their resources and create really pretty pictures for the managers and put that into PowerPoint and provide a nice report for them. I have a lot of customers who want me to go in with AWR and Ash. And that data is extremely important to me. We start getting into social media. I'm a big social media person, so I use Twitter, I use Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn all over, and then we were just talking Buffer. I believe in Buffer. It's a program that you can go in, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't have time during the day to be reading stories. I'm usually pretty busy. Everybody thinks I'm reading stories. All those things that you see that come out there all day for me, I've probably read them the night before, and I put them into something called Buffer. And Buffer goes out there every once in a while and pushes it out on LinkedIn, Twitter, Google+, Facebook for me. And it just does it every once in a while. And I get an email when my buffer is empty. And I go out at night and I fill it up again. There is a free version, there's a paid for version, but the free version does me pretty well. And any interesting story that I see and I read, I put it into my buffer. And it comes up even on my tablet, on my PC, whatever. It's just a little icon. And it makes it very easy for you then, instead of flooding out the market with all this data all at once when you're reading, you can actually put it into your buffer and have it come out slowly.
This is terrible. My favorite tool is VI. Well, there's a method behind that. Every GUI that exists has a command line underneath
Keep punching
it.
home.
My method of working is to figure out what is the command line command underneath that GUI widget, whatever it is. So if I look at SQL Developer, if I look at Enterprise Manager, I always want to know what the actual SQL commands are underneath. Sorry, I work in SQL, so I work command line pretty much exclusively, and I make scripts. I guess the biggest tool that I've come across lately has been to create pipeline functions so I can run all my SQL Plus scripts, which are no longer, hardly anyone uses SQL Plus anymore. I encapsulate them all in a pipeline table function so I can run them under SQL Worksheet out of enterprise manager. Or SQL developer, Jeff. I'm a SQL developer user as of a month ago. But my favorite tools then, besides VI, would be debuggers and SQL Trace. Over the past 20 years, I'd say the things I've learned from SQL Trace constitutes just about everything that I know today. If there's something that I don't know how, like a truncate command, I hear all kinds of myths and nonsense about what happens during this command or that command. I trace it, and I know exactly what's going on underneath the covers. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you don't know SQL Trace, or if you do and want to know more, please either feel free to email or get hold of Carrie Millsap's book about Oracle Trace and learn all the innards without having to ask. So that's about it. VI is my favorite tool. So.
Go ahead, Martin.
Going back to reality.
Ouch.
But one thing I found is I decided a couple of years ago to go completely paperless. I was traveling a lot, just carrying extra notebooks and pens got to me. And I don't know how many people here use Evernote or similar type software. It's like an online or desktop. It all syncs together. It's in the cloud. Note-taking thing. The main concept though is constantly taking notes out of meetings and also following up with task lists. No matter how smart you are, if you can't follow up on something or at least acknowledge that you can't follow up on it, it doesn't really matter. So I find that's really helped me, at least talking with clients sometimes. I was just finishing up a project actually, and I had questions that went back to December 17th, and there's no way I would have remembered them had I not written them down and also have them searchable. And so I was able to go back, and they were questions that we had both discussed that was my responsibility, and we came back and we were able to ask them and go through them, and we were able to close problems before they actually happened. So I think just really fine-grained note-taking is important as a tool set, because sometimes if you miss it, it becomes then a bug down the road that someone forgot because you discussed in the meeting and then everyone forgot about it come lunchtime. A client finds it, and then you've got a bigger problem on your hands simply because someone didn't write it down and check it off as done or not.
Good point. Hey, I do want to make sure that everyone has a chance to ask their questions if you've got a question, because we've got a little bit of time left and still have a lot of things that we want to cover, but most importantly, we want to get your questions answered. So if you have them, just please raise your hand and we'll get it put to the panel. I did want to cover maybe a question on mobile, maybe a question on cloud. And then I want to hit our Kscope conference coming up this June. Regarding the cloud, what type of application and databases are best suited to the cloud environment? And what type do you feel will be the last to move or migrate, or which ones would not migrate at all to the cloud? Kelly.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Got a buffer down.
So what types of applications and databases are best suited to the cloud, and which ones would be the last to move or may not move at all?
Newer projects are the ones that are the quickest going to the cloud, and it's actually older systems and larger systems that are going to be the last to move. A lot of people are sitting there saying, oh, we're going to migrate to the cloud. There's not a lot of migration to the cloud. You have the business that's sitting there going, how secure is it? Is it a private cloud? Is it a public cloud? You've got a lot of security questions to answer no matter what. People are very nervous about the cloud. So what I'm seeing is mostly small OLTPs. They're things that have already gone through security, or they've already got, they've already gone through all the checks, and they're newer systems.
Martin, are you doing anything specific to the cloud?
Well, not to the cloud, but with the cloud. Yeah.
With the cloud.
I'm not that high on the food chain.
Well, he's vicious today.
Yeah, so actually one thing is the ODTUG, the blogs, actually the site that when you go on the blog site, all the data you see, all that's running off the cloud right now. We're actually storing it, processing it, and spitting it out in real time using XE. So that's one thing on the cloud that we've got going that gets a lot of visibility. To also complement Kellen's answer, I think really will be the business requirements that determine what goes on the cloud and what doesn't. And it's important to understand that when you are about to go on the cloud, or if you're not. US is different, but a lot of people, I can say, outside of the US, so Canada, and especially the European Union, has rules that says their data cannot go through the US. And that's causing a lot of issues right now with non-US residents, believe it or not, that AWS, for instance, and Oracle Cloud are not a viable solution, because when you ask them where the data physically resides, it's in the US. And I mean, we've all heard about what's happened with the NSA. That's a main problem right now. But going back to the business requirements, you have to think it through and say, does everyone understand the impacts, both the positive and the negative? And that has to go all the way up to the CEO level. It's no longer at the CIO or even just the IT and database guys. And I can give a classic example. A couple months ago in Calgary, actually in the summer, we have a public healthcare system. I'm not going to get into that debate, but the contract that was signed for health and emergency, I don't know who signed it, but the actual data resided in the same physical building, both the main system and the redundancy system. And all you IT people here are like, eyes wide open, that you should never do that, and especially with EMS and all your healthcare. Long story short, a fire happened, sprinkler system went off, shut down that building. That building was also the major service provider of internet to all of Calgary. So you can imagine what happened. The entire EMS system shut down for a couple of hours, and in a city of 1 million people, that's a big problem. And not only that, I have a couple of friends that are doctors in Calgary. All the systems are digitalized. They had to manually write down everything that went on for several weeks, and then back pay people to actually put them back in the system so you kept up to date. Now you can imagine the cost and logistics of this, all because someone signed a piece of paper saying it's okay for data to reside in the same place. Going back to the cloud, had they done that, or at least a backup system, they could have prevented all of those problems. So it's important to understand what your pros and your cons are. Sometimes people only look at the cons, but there's sometimes a lot of pros involved in terms of situations such as that.
That's not necessarily a cloud issue. That's like because it could be
No,
physical systems. It's just don't put them in the same.
It's just realize, and you're right, it's not just a cloud issue, but it's making sure everyone is aware of what's at stake, both security-wise, uptime, downtime, because sometimes people just think, we'll throw it to the cloud, it's going to solve our problem. Well, it's the business requirements that are really going to define that. You need sometimes stricter business requirements. I have nothing against the cloud. I'm a huge fan of it. It's just making sure everyone understands, because sometimes people don't. And as Kellen said, some people just say, oh, it's not secure, but they may not even know what's going on.
Or people do the opposite. I see all the time the opposite. They're like, oh, I need a cloud. I'm like, why do you need a cloud? Oh, well, I read Gardner says everything's in the cloud, and they want like some tiny system. Like they just don't even understand what that means.
Those are the same ones who want Exadatas too.
Right, exactly. Like you hear some sort of buzzword, you read something on the front page or whatever, or you went to some conference where everyone said everybody's doing it, and like your system has nothing to do with the cloud. Like it should never be in the cloud. You like add tons of like network problems and whatever else. So
It's just
you get
educating
a lot of
people
time the opposite.
and having an open mind about it.
I think you guys covered it all.
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about the cloud and with ODTUG as well. So for the last 3 years, if you've been to a BI or VPN class at Kscope, it's been in the cloud, it's been in Amazon Web Services. We had real problems before that getting laptops that were big enough to run EPM or BI and actually load the stuff, and it was just this huge, colossal pain in the neck. Tim, I think you had your staff, for free, but obviously Tim paid for them, sit there and image these things, and they still really didn't work because the laptops really weren't large enough. We went to the cloud, we went to Amazon. It's just been fantastic. We have volunteers who build the images, build AWS images. We launch them, we manage them at the conference. It's really absolutely flawless. I see a lot of cloud usage in prototypes, in building applications, in proof of concepts. When I go to a client and they say, well, we would love to do this, but we don't have anything installed, and it'll be installed in like, 6.5 weeks. We're dead, right? We can do design, but we can't build anything. As long as, I've never had a client say we can't move metadata into the cloud. They will balk sometimes on data, but if you say, here's a list of accounts, or here's a list of cost centers, or here's a list of even employees, as long as it's not truly tied to numbers, that's usually not a problem. I hope that Oracle's work in planning cloud as their first true cloud product. I hope that legitimizes it, because it makes all the infrastructure stuff that customers don't want to be EPN, BI, infrastructure experts. That's not something they really care about very much. They just want the tools to work. I hope that the cloud products really take off, because I'd love to see the management of that taken away from clients who don't care about it. If they want it, fine, that's great, but no one wants that. And why would they?
Yeah, I think it'll take off for certain customers. I mean, I don't think everybody will go to the cloud.
No, but
Obviously. But I do see some, new apps coming along. Oracle's talked about some that they have coming along that are different than what we have now. So it does open up new possibilities there. There's the financial reporting cloud service. I don't know if you guys have heard about it or seen it. It actually is not HFR, financial reports, just taken to the cloud. It's completely different and new, and it does different things. It's actually meant for assembling financial reports to submit to the SEC and that type of thing. So it's really, at least that's what it looked like to me. It looked pretty cool, pretty different than what we see with other apps.
And less installations for you, Cameron.
Yeah, right, no installation for Cameron.
Right? Yes, so not my thing.
But then we go back to kind of like business requirements of the discussion of private cloud versus public cloud. And a lot of Oracle's offerings that are going to be coming up here in the future is that they're going to have products that you'll be able to actually take Exadatas and knit them together to create your own private cloud. And that's going to be huge. The ability not just to have a lot of disk, but also a lot of power behind it. And then you'll be able to build your own private cloud. And then you'll have these companies that go, oh, well, that's secure then I have control of that in my own data center. I think that's something we need to think about too, because that's where we have that challenge. People just think cloud. They're not really thinking what is the hardware underneath, where is it actually owned, where is it, the challenges that you're talking about with going, where is the Amazon cloud? It's everywhere. It's in the US, it could be out here in this other data center, it's everywhere. So.
Yeah, it's not a database, it's not an application, but the killer app for cloud so far is backups. Everybody does it. How many people use Carbonite? I do on my laptop. I mean, it's out there. Yeah, anyway, your IT department is backing up to the cloud, probably.
How many people don't back up their laptops? All right, check out Carbonite.
Everything
It
I
saved
have
one of
is
my
on
employees
Google.
big time when we lost a hard drive.
Me too.
Just boom.
There's also another
Easy.
great app called Crash Plan, very similar. I use that.
It's Canadian based, so.
It's not called.
We don't want to.
Has an A in it?
No, Crash Plan's pretty great. I like it a lot.
Okay.
All right, the most recent release of Apex really had a lot of mobile functionality added to it, Martin. But the question is not going to go to you. The question is going to go to Cameron and Tim. How are you guys? I know EI has a big mobile, has a ton of mobile functionality too. But what about the EPM stuff? How is mobile going to affect you guys?
It's not going to affect me at all, personally.
Okay. How's it going to affect your customers?
And here's why, because I live in the spreadsheet world, and the people who do spreadsheets are not going to go mobile for a long time. I mean, there just isn't really a decent mobile spreadsheet, nor is there this, mobile device that's this big so you can scroll around and see the numbers that you want to see, right? Nor can you key in very well in
If
those.
you pick up a 20-inch monitor, you got it. Just
I bought some 27 inches at Costco. They're lovely, but they're not touch. In any case,
I don't.
something's really interesting that I read. If I remember what exact detail, but it was this interesting article I read just yesterday about the paradigm shift with installable apps. One of the reasons we went to the web in the first place was because we didn't want to install applications on your desktop, right? That's kind of the big impetus that I saw early on, especially for web applications, and probably still today, right? How many of you would ever consider having a smartphone that didn't have installable apps? Right? The whole paradigm here
I
is
had a
install
BlackBerry for a
apps.
very long time.
Okay. There's always somebody in the crowd, right? But the whole paradigm shift has changed with smartphones. Now you expect to install things, so it's kind of an interesting thing. But
I mean, from a mobile perspective, the only current Oracle product that I've seen that I would think would appeal to EPM people, I can't say so much about the BI people, is the, I've forgotten the name of it, it's the thing that's the replacement for web analysis. It's the BI mobile app, I think is what it's called. It takes OBIEE and dumbs it down for EPM people, so that it's really just pointed to the database, and all the RPD stuff happens behind the scenes automatically for you. I would agree with Tim that people that look at detailed spreadsheets, financial people, are not very interested in taking what is either a very dense paper report and sticking it onto a mobile device, like especially one that's smaller than a tablet, or a spreadsheet. That just isn't the market. But for the people that take that financial information and stick it into a dashboard function, then yeah, sure. The market for that, though, I think is more on the business intelligence side rather than on the traditional EPM customer base.
So what you're saying is the things that make sense go to mobile, and the things that don't make sense don't.
And
I think
most EPM stuff tends not to be a good case for it.
I think what we see though is we see all this, wording of mobile everywhere and all this investment in mobile. Everybody expects everything's going to go to mobile, but a lot of people don't think about the things that aren't going to go to mobile.
Right.
Question, comment?
Yeah, no, I think that the reason, this is a very good debate, because this is in general the debate about mobile. I don't think people want to see what they see in their spreadsheet exactly as it is on the mobile. I think people have to start conceptualizing what in that spreadsheet do I want to see on the go. Maybe there's like 6 fields that I would love to get a summary at night from that spreadsheet, or maybe there's some sort of query I could do and get data pulled from that spreadsheet. So when people, from our data generation think like going mobile, they're like, of course I don't want this spreadsheet on the mobile. When you actually work with guys who are working today on the mobile, they look at it totally different. They're like, you're a manager who's like going on a plane, which 10 pieces of data from this spreadsheet do you need in your meeting to sit next to somebody? And they help you kind of use that data in a mobile way, and then everyone's going to need
absolutely
EPM on a mobile.
You're getting more focused data in mobile,
exactly.
and more summarized data. You're not getting to the absolute details.
Dashboards
but it's
that
still,
I hear.
exactly.
Yeah,
But it's still EPM on mobile. It's just not the frame that we see today as it is on the mobile.
Mm-hmm.
But
and another thing that I've seen in mobile, by the way, that was coming from Oracle, I think I saw a demo of this at Open World, was the approval process. So you submit a plan, it goes through several levels of approval, right? You don't want to have to log into a web page to go and check what you need to approve. You want to get an alert on your phone that says, I need to approve this. Boom, you approve it, off it goes, right? That's really a good use case for it, and that's something that we'll see coming. Actually, we see here now, I believe.
And Oracle has several BI add-ons for EPM, and I'm thinking of the financial close analytics product. I think that probably would lend itself more to a mobile tool, but for sure for Tim and I, for people who do EPM in a largely spreadsheet world, it is sometimes a little difficult to see that transition to that mobile view.
no, it took me a very long time. We do forms to mobile in my company, so it's the same thing. You see these Oracle forms, and you're like, nobody would ever want it on the mobile, and then the more you start whittling it down, like you said, you're like, wait a minute, everybody needs to do that approval process in a kind of process-oriented way.
Yep.
And with EPM, I'm sure that it's at the design stages where people are going to start saying, wait a minute, I do need that spreadsheet on my mobile. I don't need that spreadsheet. I need like these data points in a dashboard, like was mentioned, or whatever else.
Yeah.
But I think it takes like a kind of a while to get someone to like analyze and pull out, the data points.
I think what we're agreeing on then is that, there's different form factors for different situations. It's kind of like, if you paint a picture and you use one color, it can get kind of boring, right? If you use other colors, it's better. Kind of the same type of thing.
But I just think in a year, if people say, is EPM going to be on the mobile, all of us will be like, of course EPM. Like, it won't even occur to us that it's not on the mobile.
I mentioned that 4.2, Apex 4.2 had a lot of mobile functionality, and then I took the question away from you. Do you want to speak to any of the mobile functionality now in Apex?
Well, maybe I'll ask the audience, how many people here are personally using Apex?
Well,
Oh, not all at the same time.
Right, as many as using VR.
You have to hold your hand up.
Yes. Right. First of all, does everyone know what Apex is? A bit. Long story short, it's a rapid web application tool from Oracle, and it allows you to quickly take your data from the database and do it in a web presentment layer and really use PL/SQL rather than having to know all these different languages. They also, in 4.2, which is their latest big release, they really went mobile with it. So besides having your traditional desktop application, which I'm sure you've seen, your standard reports and your tabular forms and things like that, they have mobile-centric applications. So now for the standard PL/SQL developer, you can launch and release a mobile application online very quickly. So I'll leave it at that, but definitely something for people to look at, especially if your team's looking to go mobile and you don't have all the time. You can develop some quick applications. They might not be very detailed oriented. You'll need to learn a lot more to do that, but at least get certain things out of the box if you want to show a quick list of employees and how much salary they make or something like that. For dashboarding, it's really, really good. It's quick, and again, it's another free no-cost add-on from Oracle.
All right, and our final question, because we do want to have time to socialize after the panel. And this is a question that everyone in the room can answer, but we'll start with our panel. What are you most looking forward to seeing or experiencing for Kscope 14? Is there a certain session that you're looking forward to do? Could be your own, but what are you most looking forward to? We'll start on this end with Tim.
It's a tough one. There's a lot of stuff going on at Kscope 2014, and I hope everybody here is there. For me personally, I don't know, I'm a vendor, so if there's a great exhibit hall, then I'll be there. We'll have a huge booth, so that's what I look forward to. What that really means, though, is I look forward to talking to people that come by and talking about what their needs are. That's, for me, that's a huge thing. So I think it's a huge thing for every attendee to figure out and talk to other people. What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? And actually get that learning experience of finding out what other people do. That's the huge thing.
And Tim's company is actually one of our platinum sponsors this year, so we're glad to have him on board. Martin, what are you looking forward to?
Several things. Each year I look forward to the networking. This is a premier Oracle conference. It's, you read the books, you read the blogs, those are the people that come and present, so it's great networking with them, but it's also great networking with everyone. I've met so many great people in the ODTUG community that are really smart and you can learn on and also call out for questions really quickly. So that's one thing. The other thing is open mic night. So with the Apex community, they have a very loosely defined night where people can go and present anything they're working on related with Apex. I think they get about a 10-minute slot. And it's almost like a little mini unconference. And it's really cool because the audience gives feedback, asks questions, and really you get to see certain things. Sometimes you only need a 10-minute segment to see some of those applications. It's amazing to see what people are doing out there right now. So I always look forward to that because there's a lot of creative ideas out there.
Ken?
Three things that I'm looking forward to. One is of course I have to write this presentation, but I'm going to be doing a presentation on the new hybrid S-based engine, and it ought to be very, very interesting. Very interesting because I think it changes a lot of the ways we traditionally have viewed S-base. Now I only have to write the presentation. It'll be just fantastic once I can do that. The other thing is Thursday we're going to have a special event in the planning world. In the planning track, I guess is the right way to describe it. The product managers of both S-base and planning will be on a dais together, and you will be able to fire questions at them. Planning and S-base are two products that are uniquely tied to one another, right? S-base is the heart of planning. Yet it sometimes seems like the two products are developed with no thought of the other. It's sometimes, frankly, fascinating the way they do that. They duplicate product functionality, but it doesn't work the same way. They do all sorts of crazy things. This is our chance to finally ask them, why do you do what you do? And try to understand the mind of Oracle product development. And then I think the last thing that I'm really looking forward to, and this is still a tentative, is we may get the father of S-base, Bob Earl. This is the guy that invented S-base at the conference. Not super sure when, not super sure if it's really, really going to happen, but if it does happen, it will just be spectacular. For those of us who love S-base, can you tell I like the product? This is a chance to really understand the origins of the tool. It's not that old. It's only 20 years old. But the design decisions that were made in 1992 and a little bit before are with us today and still drive the way the product works. There are some things that I've been wondering about since I started with the tool in '94. There have been things that I've been wondering about for years, and I'm finally going to have the opportunity to ask them, why did you do it like this? So I'm hoping that can occur. So those are my big three for this.
It's a unique opportunity, by the way. He lives in the Seattle area. So it's the person who holds the patent at space.
Yeah.
What neighborhood?
Sorry?
My neighborhood.
In your neighborhood? Yeah,
What
what's
part
your neighborhood?
What part of Seattle?
East side.
It's right by bus.
Yeah. East of Fuji.
All right, you database types on the end. What are you looking forward to for Kscope 14?
Richard Foote is coming and speaking on indexes and everything indexes. It's a rare opportunity because, of course, he's coming here from Australia, so we don't get to see him very often. Also, Bobby Curtis, Leighton Nelson, and Gullibaldo will be speaking, and these are future ACEs and ACE directors, and I think that's extremely important. Just promoting the younger generation that's coming up in the database world.
Well, the networking, of course. I think the thing I'm most excited about at this point now is a student day that the Kscope street team, which I'd like to introduce Debbie Galnick, for those who don't know her. She's organizing, well, we're organizing. It's still very embryonic at this point, no pun intended, but we're trying to contact Oracle Academy. In fact, we've been in contact with Oracle Academy, and we're using their network of Oracle curriculum being presented for computer science at different high schools and colleges. We're advertising that nationwide, I believe, in the hopes that we can attract some of the students to come to the Kscope conference and participate in a day-long or half-day? Half-day. Hands-on lab, panel discussion, etc. And again, it's all very vague at this point. We're hoping that they can participate in the conference as much as possible, but I'd like to, I'm excited about that. Again, it goes back to the very first question this panel was asked about education and bringing people into the industry. I think that most user groups have to move beyond their current mandate of ongoing professional education and move into encouraging more entrance into IT. And I'm looking forward to this part of Kscope. The second big thing that I look forward with Kscope each year is Community Service Day. Don't know if you're familiar with that. If you're able to make it out a day early, do we know what we're doing?
It has not been announced yet.
Okay, it'll be fun. Last year we painted a high school. The high school that Sandra Bullock went to in New Orleans, and we got most of the way done, and then it rained. So there's nothing more fun than that. Yeah. So suddenly the courtyard was purple, and we had to put the purple back on the benches. So anyway, it'll be that much fun again this year.
It is a whole lot of fun, and it's one of the things that our organization is known for now. We've done it. I think we started it in 2008 in New Orleans, and so it's something we continue to do every year. Do you? Is there anyone in the audience that has something to offer up? What you're looking forward to going into the conference or anything like that? We are certainly excited to be here in Seattle for Kscope 14. Seattle is everything we could hope for in a host city, and it's going to be a wonderful conference. So I hope you tell all your friends, and we'll pack the place come June. I think that's going to conclude our presentation today. We are going to join us. If you would join us next door, we're going to have a social hour where we'd like to sit and visit with you. And so thanks again for coming, and we'll see everyone next door. Are we clear?
And we're